Welcome back into the Vandy Sports Podcast on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside Luke Wyatt, coming at you today with a roundtable. Not all three of us. Chris Lee has a busy day today and feeling a little under the weather too. So hopefully he gets back to feeling better, and then we'll get him back in the saddle as well. But Luke, let's hop into football. Obviously, we're just about 2 weeks away. We've got their last scrimmage this Saturday at 11 a.m., kind of the final tune-up there before Virginia Tech, at least simulating what that'll look like on Saturday. And I think you've got Door Jam as well next weekend, and then it's game week for Virginia Tech. So I'm going to start there and kind of where they're at in fall camp with you. We'll talk a little bit about the scrimmage as well, and then talk about maybe some of the people that are banged up, some of the people that some of the other news that's happening with Vanderbilt football right now. But I do want to get to all of our sponsors. The Wash House, our presenting sponsor for basketball season, which is also rapidly approaching. Are you dreading laundry days? It's stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy. Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. They've got 2 convenient locations in Nashville. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. Baseball obviously has settled down a little bit, but all of our content on the baseball side is brought to you by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. That partnership began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. And they now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. Today, they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more info, visit their website at mpmci.com. And then we'll get to Sutherland and Belk as well when we get to the mailbag. And I want to throw this out here at the very beginning. And Luke, I know you may want a tidbit on this as well, but if any of you guys are interested in sponsoring the show, whether it's ahead of football season, ahead of basketball season, or baseball, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Again, that's chrislee70@gmail.com. Luke, we want people to help us help them give the best coverage of Vanderbilt sports. We think we're doing that, but we also need the help of other people. And so, again, if anyone out there wants to sponsor or knows of somebody that wants to sponsor, just shoot Chris an email at chrislee70@gmail.com.
Absolutely. I'm not obviously full time on this, but you guys do a tremendous job, and I've gone down the wormhole on YouTube and seen some other people that are trying to cover Vandy, and it's obvious that you guys, and I'm not talking about myself here, but you guys do a tremendous job in covering Vanderbilt with the behind the scenes type stuff that other people don't get. You work at it, you enjoy it. It comes across that you enjoy it. And folks, please, if you can, help us out, because to keep this type of coverage, it takes sponsorship, as everybody knows.
Absolutely. And, Vanderbilt has been really good as well with access, whether it's Coach Byington when he was brought in, Clark, and all the football guys, especially after practice, whether it's a feature or whatever, everybody has really been awesome dealing with. So definitely, again, email Chris Lee, chrislee70@gmail.com if you have any interest in becoming a sponsor. Luke, we've got some interest in talking football right now. Vanderbilt is in an interesting time, just like everyone else, unless you started early if you're playing in week 0. But it's a normal fall camp schedule this year for Vanderbilt. And we were just talking before we hopped on. This is the time where some frustration comes out. It's starting to feel like a drag. You're hitting on the same guys. I mean, what is this like? Because you've been a part of just a few fall camps. Put us in the mind of a player and just how much of a drag it can feel like, because you're close, but you're still just about 2 weeks away from the first game.
Right. Well, and from you guys' standpoint, and for me when I'm over there, I always see now is those couple of hours when we're out there on the practice field and watching them practice. There's still another 10, 12, 14 hours of what they're doing with meetings, with treatments, with weights, social media types things that have to be done. And it gets to be frustrating. You're seeing the same people every morning, early in the morning. you're seeing the same coaches, and when you have to smell the breath of the same person all day long, it gets a little old. And we don't realize that. We're just watching the product on the field, and that's it. But it's the dog days of two-a-days. Used to be, it was physically grueling. It's not so much physical now as it is mental. I think they're pulled in every different direction because of social media, and also because of more meeting time, because you can't do the physical stuff you used to do. There used to be three-a-days during football camp. I remember three full pad practices before. And by this time, you're walking around like a zombie. They've gotten rid of that, thank goodness, because I always thought that was overkill anyway. And but this is the time when you're going to see some players get frustrated, some coaches get frustrated, because you're not at your best. In fact, it's probably the hardest time to get your adrenaline right and get out there and perform it. But you got to do it because, like you said, Billy, we are 2 weeks away from a football game.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of the disappointment, frustration after practice a couple of days ago. Clark kind of laid out some of his frustration, after practice. And, we get to see that. We're on the field waiting to talk to, whatever coach or players we're going to talk to. And, we could easily see the frustration, and saw a couple of leaders emerge as well and try to talk to the team. But Clark just said, I don't see an identity. We need to find our identity. We need to grow up, things like that. And it feels like for Clark, for him mentally, he knows, all right, here we go. We've got to buckle up and go, because this is do or die in a sense. Now he probably approached last year this way as well, but it's time. Like, I think he's trying to get that across. But you've also got a lot of summer enrollees that are still trying to mesh, are trying to, whether it's some of the receivers like Fungi or Wiley that are still trying to learn that offense that got in later, or some of the defenders as well. That's what Clark mentioned as well. So at the end of the day, it'll come together, right? I mean, I think we're still about 2 weeks away, but the big thing Clark said that caught my eye was, we got to grow up. And that's something that, as a fan, you probably don't want to hear, but Clark he felt like he had to lay that out. And watching practice, from up where we can't tell whether it's really a bad practice or a good practice. But at the same time, Clark Lee can, and he felt like he needed to address that to his team and publicly to the media.
Well, Billy, what happens, and you made a great point with some of these late enrollees, you're drinking from a fire hose from those guys, and you're trying to move up the depth chart. And kids nowadays, as we know, they want to play. If they don't play, they want to move on and that type of thing. And so I think, kids have to understand there's a process still involved, no matter what, with NIL and transfer portals and all that. It's still, you got to perform at practice, and you got to do everything that you're supposed to do. Show up to meetings on time, show up to your treatments on time. Don't miss weight room activities. And some of the kids just aren't ready for that schedule yet, and they have to jump aboard. It's like a spinning top, and you got to wait till it comes around. You jump on real quick, and you take off, and you just got to drink from that fire hose and get everything you can. Clark's going to be patient with you, but at the same time, he's got to worry about that too deep that he's got to set here in about a week and then go with it. And then those other guys are going to be scout team guys, and there's going to be some guys that aren't happy about that. So you're, like I said, you're right in the middle of the muck right now, and everybody's going through it, everybody. But at Vanderbilt, with new coaches on the offensive side and Clark being the defensive coordinator, you see a whole lot of this, I'm sure, right now at camp. But it'll work its way out. I will say this, and not that we won't or can't beat Virginia Tech, but I'd rather play Alcorn State week 1, and then because you always improve the most after you see yourself in a game. Week 1 to week 2, that would be nice. But it's reality is we're playing Virginia Tech, so we got to get ready and do it.
Well, I'm sure it's both ways. I'd like to believe Virginia Tech would rather play someone else other than a Tim Beck, Jerry Kill offense in Vanderbilt there in week 1. So for both sides, obviously we cover Vanderbilt, but yeah, you're right, Luke. For both sides, that game feels big. It's one of it's a non-conference game, but it's not an Alcorn or a Georgia State or a Ball State. That's a really good ACC team, and Virginia Tech respects Vanderbilt as well.
Sure.
So we'll see. But look, before we get into the mailbag, the first scrimmage I thought was interesting. They got a lot of plays in, a lot of football. It was a long scrimmage, and there were a few things that caught my eye offensively. Diego Pavia's comfortability. Again, it wasn't perfect, but you felt like when Diego was in, they were able to move the football fairly consistently, as opposed to when Nate Johnson was in. You didn't feel the same comfortability, and of course that's natural. I mean, Pavia has known this offense for the last 3 years. Johnson, of course, came in the spring, but still, I mean, you're going up against a guy that played under Beck and Kill and all the other New Mexico State staffers for the last couple of years and really played well. So that specifically caught my eye. Pavia and his control of the offense. Defensively, hard to take away a ton, but I did like the way some of those younger secondary players played, whether it's Jalen Lackey, Jalen Gilbert got a lot of time in as well. Sandy Neola is a guy, Luke, that I think will probably have to play this year. But I do want to get your take from the scrimmage, just maybe some overall takeaways before we hop into the mailbag.
Sure. I was on the offensive side. I sat right on the front row. My wife wanted to come watch it, so I was trying to explain a little football to her while I was watching it. And I was watching the interaction with Coach Klanakis and Coach Kill. Very impressed with the way they handled situations. Listen, a scrimmage like that from a standpoint of the media covering it is totally different from what the coaches want to get accomplished. It's not as important for them because you're running guys in and out. You're rolling in ones with twos with threes, walk-ons with twos, all kinds of stuff. So they're just trying to see that. So you're not going to get a lot of connectivity and a lot of pretty football during scrimmages usually this time of year. And I said, not to pat myself on the back, but I said 2 months ago and Clark won't say it, but I'll say it, Diego Pavia is the starting quarterback. He is. It's just there's too much of an advantage there for him. And nothing against Nate Johnson, but he's having to learn something that Diego Pavia knows in his sleep. So I do think Nate's going to play, and I think he'll probably play some in the first game. But I think those two are head and shoulders ahead of everybody else. And the third quarterback between Berlowitz and Dickey is yet to be seen. Other things offensively that I saw, I'm really liking, and knock on wood again, injuries can always change this, but I'm really liking the combinations on the offensive line. I like that we've got some older guys, some experienced guys that have played at other schools. I think that's going to help us because last year, as you know, our offensive line was a bust. Let's be honest with you, it was a bust. Mm-hmm. And part of that was scheme. I'm not blaming just the kids. Part of that was scheme. But anyway, you've got guys that started on that offensive line that may not see the field or will see limited reps. The receiver room, it'd be nice to have London Humphrey back. We all talk about that, to have a guy that's a game breaker. That's all they're missing, really. They've got some guys that can catch the football. Hoskins looked great the other day. But the tight ends, and I've said this before, that's the key to this football team. Because of the type of offense we're going to run, you're going to see a whole lot of stats rung up by Cole Spence, Eli Stowers, Cam Johnson, all the tight end room. They're huge. And catching the ball in the backfield. The running back, Cedric's going to be number one. There hasn't been a clear-cut number two. So I think Ced will catch a lot of footballs. He'll catch three. Look for him to be targeted 4 to 6 times a game out of the backfield.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the offensive line. Bring in Chase Mitchell from Liberty, and you bring in Stephen Hubbard from UTEP. Both those guys are grad transfers who are older guys who played a lot of football. In 2021 at Liberty, that's when Mitchell really started playing, and he even got there in 2020. Stephen Hubbard's been playing football since 2018. So, I mean, those are two guys that you're going to really rely on. Stephen Lasoya. I don't want to forget about. Now, you're at Vanderbilt. Again, whether the offensive line looks really good or really bad in fall camp, you can't take too much from it. But Tim Beck emphasized, Luke, that Vanderbilt wants to run the football. They want to be a physical offense. And their goal in that scrimmage, I'm glad you said, was not to drop back and air it out. because you got to get that running game solidified first. And so that'll be interesting to see. And there's always games in between the lines with these scrimmages. Like, why are they focusing on this run game potentially more? Well, maybe Virginia Tech, maybe that's a little bit more of what they want to do. We'll see. I think we'll be able to ask more about that to Tim Beck. But Mitchell and Hubbard on the offensive line, Luke, I think are going to be pretty formidable. But let's hop in the mailbag. We got a lot of questions, so I don't want to keep talking about too much. We've got a lot to get to here with these questions, and it's brought to you by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. They are sponsoring Chat Room today's mailbag. Of course, if you or a loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200, to see what your rights are and if they can help. All right, we're going to kick it off with Godors 94. Have you changed your expectations after watching a couple of weeks of fall camp? I really haven't much, Luke. And again, I know you've been to a few. You saw the scrimmage. I haven't much. Before fall camp started, I looked at this and said, okay, I think this is a team that can and probably should go at least 4-8 this year. But I could see 5, 6. I don't know. That's obviously going to be tough, but 3-9 would be a disappointment, I think, to not get one more of those non-conference, because we know the 3 wins they're going to get. But going 4-8, I don't know that necessarily means they win an SEC game as well. That could mean they beat Virginia Tech. Now, in all likelihood, it probably does mean they beat an SEC team if you get to 4. But Luke, I'm still in the same belief of this is a 4-8 team that should go 4-8. Now, I still think the floor is probably 3-9, and probably should be, but the ceiling, I don't know. I'm still kind of waiting to see on that, but I will go ahead and say my ceiling is 5-7, but an outside shot at getting to 6. That's how I've been the last few months. Even before fall camp started.
Well, I'm pretty close to being agree with you. I always said 4-6, and the one thing I will say is what's happened in this day and age. 2 years ago when we went 5-7. The 2 games we won were against 2 teams, and not to take nothing away from Vanderbilt. They played well in those games. 2 teams they were at the part of their season where they weren't quite interested in what they were doing. That's when Vanderbilt can really sting you. It's because Vanderbilt's every game's important to them, every SEC game, because they're trying their best to win one. And at this point in time, I think that it's hard to say. You always look at a schedule and you say, you should win this, you should win this. This is a coin flip, and then the other ones are tough to win. It never works out that way. It hardly ever does. So, I think 4-6 is where we should land.
Yeah, and I think, Luke, one of my expectations that has changed, going back a couple of months ago, I thought this cornerback room specifically, take the safeties out, I thought the cornerbacks were going to be a lot better and we're really going to be able to just to lock down the edges more than they have. Well, now you lose Marlon Jones and Mark Davis. I think that takes a hit. I don't have as high of expectations for the cornerback room now. I still like Colby Taylor a lot, but he can't sit there and play every snap for 4 quarters and the whole season. Tyson Russell is going to have to step up. I mean, Taco Wright's going to have to play this year, Luke. Jalen Lackey is a guy I like. He's made some plays in practice. So you've got some pieces there, but I still worry about that cornerback room slightly. And it's rare in a season, coming into a season at Vanderbilt, where you don't, Luke. I mean, you had some years there under Franklin, had some years there under Mason where you really felt good about that room, but they have to shore that up, Luke. But so I would say that I don't know if there's a position group that you have changed your opinion on coming into fall camp, but I would say corner, because with Davis and Jones out, that's a blow.
Yeah, it is. Now, one of those guys definitely, Jones would have started, in my opinion. So your starter would probably been Jones and Taylor. Well, you've got one left. What that also means, like you said, a guy like Lackey, Taco Wright's going to have to play, and he's going to have to do better than what he's done in camp, to be honest with you. I haven't been impressed with him in camp. But if you can roll 4 corners in and keep them healthy, you'll still be okay. Now, one other caveat with that, you also, I think you're going to have better pass rush with Sidnor and Zaylen Wood. That's going to help those guys out and having to cover for a longer period of time. If they do their job, we can get off the field on 3rd and long.
All right, let's go back over to offense from Fita's boss. How big of a gap is there between Pavia and Nate Johnson for the starting quarterback battle? Still trying to figure this out. And I said this a few days ago, I think one of the last podcasts. Nate Johnson, I'm not jumping the gun on him. Like he's still a talented kid, but just from what I've seen so far in camp and in the scrimmage, he is not at the level of Pavia when it comes to running this offense, this specific offense. And that's no surprise. I mean, I think we all could have guessed that. So I think it's pretty sizable, Luke. I mean, it's been a pretty big difference. Now, there's times where Nate goes in there and he'll complete a ball and we look and we go, okay. I mean, he's not just, it's not like he's been awful. I want to get that out there too. But you also haven't seen, like, when they've gone live and even in the scrimmage, there wasn't a 35, 40, 45-yard run escape from Nate either. So I almost think that he's in a little bit of a bind, with whether it's his feet, his mind, I'm not sure. But do you blame the kid? I mean, you bring in Pavia and naturally you feel for the guy. Now, players nowadays are making some money, so I don't know how bad you can feel for him, but at the end of the day, Luke, Pavia, I think it's pretty sizable. Now, I don't know that we know Pavia's ceiling here. I think fans want to believe that Pavia can lead Vanderbilt to a bowl this year and really just explode onto the scene. But I'm still curious to see how much better can Pavia look in camp, and then how much does he improve. I say within this offense, he knows the offense, but just with the receivers and with the tight ends and just the chemistry, that'll be something I'm watching. But yeah, I mean, right now, like I'd say it's pretty sizable. I don't know how to put that into words, but I think Pavia's got a pretty decent advantage over him. Not to say Johnson won't play, like you said.
Yeah, I think Pavia, like I said, he'll be the starting quarterback. Now, I do think this. I think Coach Beck and Coach Kill and Klilakis are smart enough to know what Nate can do and what he's caught on to. So you could develop packages for Nate to come in during the football game. And when Pavia gets dinged or whatever it may be and has to come out, gets the air knocked out of him, whatever it may be, Nate's going to be the first guy in. Nate can be very lethal with those legs. He can fly. He's, in my opinion, probably a better runner than Mike Wright. Mike Wright had straight ahead speed, but Nate Johnson is a special athlete. They'll both play this year, and I think you'll see it sometime a third quarterback get in there for whatever reason. But Diego's a leader. You can just see it. I watched it Saturday on the sideline. He's bouncing around, talking to his O-line, dapping him up. He smiles all the time. He's having a good time. He enjoys. You can tell he loves football. Nate is still a little bit more tense because he's still learning. Nothing against Nate. But again, he'll play. They're both going to play, but Diego will be our starting quarterback.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder. I mean, Pavia is not the biggest kid, but he's like a lot of those shorter quarterbacks, whether it's a Manziel, a Mayfield. There's been a lot of them. I think back to Mason Fine, a kid that played at North Texas. I don't remember if you remember him.
Yeah.
There's something about them where they feel the game, they see the field, they know where to go, they know what to do, they know when to scramble, and I've seen that. Now, it hasn't been perfect for Diego, but there's some times and some plays where you look at it and you go, man, felt like I was watching his tape from last year at Mexico State, and there's familiarity. I mean, how often does this happen, Luke, where you bring over a quarterback from a team, his OC, his head coach, his best weapon in his tight end Stowers, brought a running back over in Monty Jones, who they liked, the running back coach. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. I think that's something you can't forget about either. There's so much familiarity. It's not like Diego just came over and Vanderbilt brought in a random OC. Like, this is their guy. This is Beck and Kill's guy.
Right. And here's the thing with Diego, touched on him. He's not the tallest guy in the world. So they're not asking him to do 7-step drops and sit in the pocket and read a defense. He's just an ad libber. He's going to make it happen. Now, what has to happen with that, though, is you have to play under control with that. And his receivers have to be on the same page. There's got to be a whole lot of chemistry there. If not, you'll run into some mistakes. But Diego's going to make those mistakes at times, but he's also going to make some big plays with his feet and with his smarts.
All right, from Foghorn. Looking forward to hearing that Foghorn. Which SEC opponent offers the best chance for us to beat them, and why? And Luke, this is an interesting question. Obviously, I think it's later in the season. I look at that Auburn game because of exactly what New Mexico State did last year. I do think Auburn's going to be ready to play, and it's hard for me to say Vanderbilt's going to go down there and win. I think they definitely can. But after last year, Auburn is no doubt going to be ready for that. I look at that next game at home, South Carolina. I don't think much of South Carolina. They were picked. Let's see. They were picked 14th, I think, or 13th in the SEC media poll. They lose Spencer Rattler. I know you have Rocket Sanders and pretty good receiver in Nick Harbor, but I've never thought of South Carolina as a huge threat. And look, Vanderbilt almost beat them a couple of years ago. Probably should have. Last year, obviously that was an embarrassment. Throw that one out. But I say South Carolina. Luke, I think, it's later in the season. Maybe they're struggling under Beamer. He's got his feet to the fire, and Vanderbilt is able to trip him up. I just don't see a ton from that South Carolina team. And Vanderbilt's been knocking on the door. Maybe this is the year. And Clark and this staff, they've emphasized this in practice. That game, I think, still haunts them a couple of years ago for them letting that happen. So I think South Carolina, but I would also throw Auburn in there. Maybe Kentucky. I think Kentucky's going to be good, but I'll make South Carolina my team.
I'd have to agree with that. The only problem is we've been better than South Carolina several times in 15 years and still lost to them. But the law of averages are it would be South Carolina if we're only going to win one. But I hold out hope there's somebody else on there you can pop. A team like South Carolina, Auburn, or Kentucky, their season can go south pretty quick because they're those teams that I think are in the bottom half of the SEC. I don't think they're in the top 8. And any of those teams that things aren't going well when you play them. And I always look at this too. Look at who they play the week before you played them, and look who they're getting ready to play the next week. That has a whole lot to do with your chances, I think.
The old Vanderbilt sandwich factor in that. What's a shame here, Luke, on the schedule is that Missouri isn't, the old Missouri of when Mason had played them a lot and had them close, and even early in Clark's tenure where they almost beat Missouri as well. Now Missouri is the real deal. So I think that's a little bit of a shame. But I'd say South Carolina. Let's see, Dorfan 6. How many wins do you think we could get if we beat Virginia Tech? And I think that's a good question. Like if you go out week 1 against Virginia Tech and lose by 3 scores, Clark probably has his feet to the fire. You've got fans freaking out, and you're probably looking at more of a 3, maybe 4-win season. But if you beat Virginia Tech, I think you're looking at least a 4, maybe a 5, an outside shot at 6. I think Virginia Tech, Luke, is comparable to a South Carolina, to an Auburn. Now, and Kentucky, like that's your 4th winnable SEC game, I think. And who knows? Like last year, early on, the first 4 games for Virginia Tech, they really struggled. They didn't have Kyron Drones in there, so they inserted him about a third of the way into the season, and he really changed it for them. And he's coming back. They got a lot of guys coming back. Brent Pry is a good coach, similar to Clark, defensive mind. It's going to be low scoring. They've also got Chris Marv as their linebackers coach. So you've got a lot of good defensive minds in this game, Luke. So I think Vandy's got a shot. I really do. And if they beat Virginia Tech, the question was how many SEC or how many wins do you think we could get if we beat Virginia Tech? If they beat Virginia Tech, I think they could get to 5 because that shows you, Luke, okay, You've got 3 more non-conference games you should win. That'll get you to 4. If you beat Virginia Tech, you can definitely go beat South Carolina at home. Maybe
Sure.
go down to Auburn and beat them. You've beaten Kentucky at Kroger Field in the last couple of years. I would say 5 at the least, and maybe 6.
Sure.
Because you just look at it and you never know. Like maybe Missouri is more down this year. Maybe Kentucky is way up this year. Sometimes you don't know, but yeah, if they beat Virginia Tech, Luke, this team I think is it will be close to making a bowl, if not making a bowl. Now, again, I don't want to get over my skis, but beating Virginia Tech tells me that Vanderbilt can go beat South Carolina, and Vanderbilt could compete against Kentucky and Auburn, and who knows in the fourth quarter.
Well, if you beat Virginia Tech, that's just like an SEC win to me because they're better or as good as Mississippi State, Arkansas, Florida, possibly Kentucky, Auburn, and South Carolina. So there's 6 or 7 teams in the SEC that they're just as good as or better. And that tells me if you're able to beat Virginia Tech right out of the chute, then heck, you can win 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, from Columbiano Door, do you see more intermediate routes and passes over the middle in the passing game? That was one frustrating part of our offense last year, and a place where so many other offenses get easy yards. I would say, yeah, it's still hard to tell really what they want to do in the passing game. I think they're still trying to figure that out. I think play action will and could be dangerous for this team this year, whether it's Stowers or Spence getting in on the action, or Junior Sherrill. Sherrill has been really impressive. Skinner hasn't popped as much as I thought he would. Neither has Loic Fungi. He's gotten a little bit better. They got to get those receivers involved, and you got to have 4 or 5 that you can go to. That's what I noticed last year, Luke, with New Mexico State. You had 4 or 5 guys, that were catching the ball each game. You never really knew. Like, it didn't matter who Pavia. He may not have had a go-to guy. Maybe it was Stowers, but it didn't matter which guy it was because they had a good bit of receivers that could go catch the ball. So, yeah, I do see more intermediate routes, Luke, and I think that's going to be important, especially on those read plays where maybe Pavia reads a linebacker, keeps the football, and throws that little pop pass over the head of the linebacker, however they do it. But I have seen a lot of the middle of the field, those soft areas of the zone where Pavia is able to find, whether it's a tight end or a streaking receiver. So I think that'll be important.
Well, I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago that this is going to be like the 82 Vanderbilt. And what I mean by that is now that team was more through the football more. However, they did that because people didn't respect their run because they didn't run a whole lot. Vanderbilt this year with Coach Beck and Coach Kill, if they load the box, we're going to throw the football. We're going to have to throw the football. So this offense is predicated on numbers, and just like any other offense, if they load the box and say we're going to take this option game and this read game away from you, we're going to throw it over top of them. Sometimes you got to throw it deep. If you don't complete it, you got to at least stretch them. And I look forward to Virginia Tech. I think if they have a weakness on defense, is their secondary. I think it's going to be tough to run the football against Virginia Tech. So you're going, a lot of those, like you said, pop passes, screens. Maybe I don't know if they have a Utah pass in the package, that type of stuff. But a whole lot to the tight ends, and then every once in a while chuck it deep so you can keep them honest.
Yeah, and the second part of this question is, do you see this offensive system scheming guys open more often than last year? I would say yes to that as well. I have noticed that where Pavia will have a design rollout and, feels like he's looking at one guy, that whole way. And even with New Mexico State last year, you throw the tape in, there were some really creative ways of getting Stowers open, of getting, I forget the names of their receivers last year, but getting their dudes open. I think Sherrill could be that guy where you scheme him open. He's going to be coming in motion a lot as well, similar to what he did last year. They got to find another guy they can scheme to get open. We know the tight ends can. I mean, the tight ends are going to be terrific weapons. Is that next receiver, Skinner's, more of a possession type guy. Is that next receiver Bell? Is it McVay, who's looked really good in practice? Brown, Tristan Brown as well. So you've got some receivers there that need to step in and take over some of those secondary roles. So, yeah, I do think guys will be schemed open more often this year. Colombiano Door also asks, between Micah Bell, Joseph McVay, Tristan Brown, and Wiley, will any of them sneak into a starting role as wide receiver number 3 this year? I don't think so, Luke. I think they're fairly settled. I think the big question to watch will be Fungi, because Luke Fungi, I had him slotted to start at one of those receiver spots. But now you look at it, and again, he's struggled a little bit. Maybe Wiley steps into his starting role that I thought at first. I don't think Bell, McVay, Brown, or Wiley will be receiver 3, but it could be receiver 4. Like Micah Bell is a guy, Luke, that they're going to need to make some plays this year because he's so fast, but he's probably going to be more of a gadget guy. Joseph McVay, though, if he can step into a role similar to what Sherrill did late last year, I think could be impactful. So they've got some characters there that they need to step up. We just don't know who will and when they will.
Well, that's one position on the field that freshmen can play is wide receiver. If you can catch the football and make separation, there's room for you to play right away. And especially with us, I think top 4 receivers right now is probably Richie Hoskins, Skinner, Sherrill, and Fungi. Those 4 would be my top 4. And then, of course, a lot of times it's only going to be 2 wide outs, and we're going to have double tight ends in there a whole lot. So,
I did forget. Yeah, I forgot to mention Hoskins. He's definitely a guy to watch that has been really consistent. And that's the other thing. These receivers will not be as relied upon as a lot of fans might want them to be. Let's see. We already talked about Virginia Tech's biggest weaknesses. Luke, you said you think their secondary is one of their weaknesses. I have also read that their interior defensive line, you can run at them a little bit. Again, who knows at this point in time? We'll definitely be getting somebody on for Virginia Tech game week to really dive into that. But that is interesting. Their secondary, if that is a weakness, Pavia is going to be able to sit back, throw the ball, and try to find his guys.
Yeah, I think that, that's gauging. Like you said, we don't know because that's gauging it off last year's numbers and looks and what they have returning. First games are always because they're going to be, like you said, they don't want to play us right now. We don't want to play them, but we're going to play each other. So that feeling out process, heck, this could be an old school type football game that it winds up being 14-10 type thing. It could be.
Yeah. And it's going to be weird. I told Chris during the scrimmage that you could write a documentary on Vanderbilt home season openers, whether it's Temple, under Mason, any of those season openers under James Franklin, the Ole Miss game on a Thursday night, South Carolina, I think, was on a Thursday night. Clark with Hawaii last year with the hanging scoreboard, like something weird is going to happen. And so just be ready for that, because especially with it's at 11 a.m. and 11 a.m. at Vanderbilt Stadium usually gets interesting. So, and it's week 1.
Yeah.
So you get ready for some weird stuff there. All right, let's keep it rolling with old Jack Wagon. Has the structure, pace of practice changed with the coaching changes? I think it has. Obviously offensively, I noticed that right away. They started their first practice, boom, they went live. They were going NASCAR. Kill was screaming at the offensive lineman. Pavia was out there. It was a change of pace from what we had seen. The offense looked totally different. I think Jerry Kill and Tim Beck and Klanakis as well, offensively, they have added an element of, okay, this offense is respectable now, as opposed to last year where you just felt like they were just there. It wasn't really ever much of a threat, even in practice. Much. Now it had some good receivers, but this offense is more dynamic and more balanced, I think. So that has added the offensive format, and whenever they go live, it's more competitive. And so I don't know much about the format, but just the pace, Luke, the pace has definitely picked up.
Well, this offense, when it executed correctly, is going to be a frustrating offense to play against because they're going to just get you at 3 and 4 yards, 6 yards, and just move the chains on you, which is death by 1,000 cuts. And I think that's the formula for Vanderbilt football. Always has been, always will be. I think that's the way to go. Is move. If you can move the chains, get down into the red zone, make plays in the red zone. That's how you win at Vanderbilt, and you have limited defensive reps. That way, you even though the other team may be more talented, you can still beat them because patience is a virtue, and not a lot of defenses have a lot of patience.
Some things never change. That's so true about how you win at Vanderbilt, and that'll be interesting to see. Maybe some of the old time fans, they look back and it looks a little bit like that 82 offense. It probably modernized, of course, but that'll be interesting to watch. Let's see here. VU Superior, will our offensive line and defensive lines look and play like SEC offensive lines and defensive lines? Well, I'm to be determined on that, Luke. I think they will be better than last year. And I think they will be able to play smash mouth football more than they did last year. But to what level? I mean, I think against Auburn, Kentucky, and South Carolina and Virginia Tech, those four, Vanderbilt will be able to move the ball better on the ground than we might expect. But you get up to the big leagues, of course, with Alabama, Texas, LSU, and Tennessee. Not sure about that. And so that's a tough question to answer, but I think they will be better. They're older. They have a new coach that knows what he's doing. He's coached for a long time. And they may not have great depth, but even behind some of those guys like Grayson Morgan, what's going to happen there? I'm interested to see. Gage Pitchford, where does he factor in? Cade McConnell's a good player they like to back up Lasoya. So you got a little bit of depth, but it's also what they're doing. What Klonakis wants them to do is different than last year. And I think they'll be better, Luke, but it's to be seen, what this offensive line's ceiling is.
I think they'll be better. The one thing they'll be much better at is, if you'll remember last year, a ton of times when we had a 3rd and 1, 3rd and 1.5 or 2, it was hard for us to pick it up on the ground. I think this team will be much better at getting a yard or two. You won't see near as many tackles for losses in the backfield. I think they're going to be able to grind out first downs. And that's going to be key and huge for this team, just to hang on to the football. You don't have to score a touchdown every time you got it. And as long as you can get in field goal range. I think Brock Taylor's a pretty good kicker. So you get in field goal range. Like I said, we're going to be in some low-scoring games, I think, sometime this year. I really do.
All right, GoDoors 94. Does Jerry Kill do interviews? It's a good question. I have asked that, and he will be made available at some point. So we will hear from Coach Kill. He did a feature with the Tennessean that was really good a few months ago. And so he's not the head coach. He's got an interesting role. I don't think they're trying to hide him or anything, but I was told that he will be made available soon. So we'll get something done with Coach Kill. G-Barks 24, last one here, Luke. Is this offensive line capable of creating running lanes through quarterback runs, passes to the running backs, or handoffs to backs and receivers? I know we just kind of touched on that, but to me, that is the key this season. Yeah. If you're going to go beat a Virginia Tech, a Kentucky, an Auburn, whoever, South Carolina, this offensive line is going to have to provide those lanes, not 100% of the time. You just need – it has to be better than last year. They could not run the football really much at all. The passes to the running backs, you got to have time to run those screens as well. There was way too much activity in the backfield, way too quick last year. And so you got to hold up for an extra second. I mean, I'm not saying you've got to sit there and be a Georgia offensive line, but you've got to give your quarterback a little bit more time than what they did last year. And with Coach Klonakis, he's worked with guys like Kaepernick and Jackson. This is a whole different running style and how he coaches it, because you've got running quarterbacks. So these running backs are also going to have to block for another running back. You might see 3 running backs in there at one time, block for the quarterback. So there's a lot to it, Luke. But again, this offensive line, if they can't do this, I struggle to see this team have success this year.
I'll reiterate what I just said. I think we will be better. I think we'll be better in short yardage, and that's probably the biggest key, because I think in our normal offense, when you're just running your offense, taking the ball to 25 and going, we're going to be able to move the ball 3 and 4 yards at a time and pick up first downs. When we get in 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2 last year, I mean, we almost had to throw it every time, or if we ran it, we didn't get it. It was a tackle for loss or stoned at the line of scrimmage. This team will be able to move it better. Now, again, against Alabama and Texas, who knows? We may not be able to move it at all like that. But like you said, half of our schedule, we should be able to move the football.
Can't wait. We're just about 2 weeks away from Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech. They got a scrimmage this Saturday. Only 2 scrimmages, so this will be the last scrimmage for Vanderbilt, and then they'll have that the door jam the following weekend, and then it's game week for Vanderbilt and the Hokies. Luke, any parting thoughts before we close up shop?
No, like you said, this is the last scrimmage. After that, you start developing a depth chart. It may not become public, but in their coaches' minds, they know who now they have to get ready and start doing install for Virginia Tech within the next week, after this week. So it's here, guys. So strap it on. Let's go.
Buckle up. And real quick, before we let you go, this podcast has always been free, and we plan for it to always be free. Here's how you can help keep it that way. The listener, give the podcast a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. And if you're listening, haven't subscribed to VandySports.com yet, please do. It's $99 a year, $9.99 per month, and helps us tremendously. Also, go subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel. That is free. And also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, again, like we mentioned at the top, email Chris at chrislee70@gmail.com. That's chrislee70@gmail.com. That's Luke Wyatt. I'm Billy Derrick. We'll see you next time on the Vandy Sports Podcast.